He paid just $8,500 for an abandoned chalet everyone called cursed, and when they stopped laughing long enough to watch him lose everything, Marcus Reed discovered that beneath the rotting floorboards lay $260 million in hidden wealth and a dead man's final wish that would change not just his life, but an entire town's future. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning Marcus Reed woke up to find his electricity shut off. He didn't cry. He'd learned years ago that tears didn't pay bills or feed kids. Instead, he sat at the edge of his mattress in the dark, listening to the sound of his 2 children still sleeping in the room next door, and he made a decision. He was 38 years old, a widower, a father, and a man who had spent the last 4 years clawing his way through grief and debt with nothing but calloused hands and stubborn hope, and he was tired of just surviving. Pine Ridge, Colorado wasn't the kind of town that made the news. It was small, tucked into the mountains like a secret the world had forgotten. Population 3,200, 1 grocery store, 2 churches, and a main street lined with businesses that opened late and closed early. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, your business, and your bank balance. And Marcus knew what they said about him. Poor Marcus. Lost his wife. Drowning in medical bills. Those poor kids. His daughter Sophie was 12 now, sharp as a tack and far too aware of how tight money was. She'd stopped asking for new clothes 2 years ago, started wearing her mother's old sweaters even though they hung too big on her thin frame. His son Jake was 9, still young enough to believe his dad could fix anything, still drawing pictures of castles and spaceships and futures that felt impossibly far away. They shared a bedroom in the cramped 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Marcus slept on a mattress in what was supposed to be a dining room. The kitchen table was where they did everything. Homework, ate meals, counted change, dreamed small dreams. Marcus worked as a handyman and carpenter, taking whatever jobs came his way. He fixed decks for people who owned vacation homes worth more than he'd earn in a lifetime. He repaired fences for ranchers who paid in cash and sympathy. He built custom bookshelves for families whose biggest problem was having too many books. And he did it all with a quiet dignity that made some people respect him and others pity him. He didn't want either. He just wanted enough. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when Marcus stopped by Hoffman's hardware store to pick up supplies for a deck repair job. The owner, old Garrett Hoffman, was restocking nails when Marcus walked in. "Morning, Marcus," Garrett said without looking up. "Usual." Marcus nodded. 3 pounds of deck screws, the weatherproof kind, and whatever sandpaper you've got on sale. Garrett rang him up, then paused. "You hear about the auction?" Marcus shook his head. "What auction?" "The Hanson estate. That old chalet up on Ridgeline Road. Been sitting empty since, hell, the 80s, I think. County's finally auctioning it off." Marcus had seen that place. Everyone in Pine Ridge had. It sat on 15 acres of pine forest, accessible only by a private road that had turned to gravel and mud over the decades. The chalet itself was massive, a relic from when rich Europeans thought Colorado mountains were the next Swiss Alps. But it had been abandoned for over 30 years. Boarded up, windows broken, roof sagging under the weight of winter after winter. People said it was haunted. Others said it was worthless. "What's the starting bid?" Marcus asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Garrett chuckled. 8,000. Been sitting at that price for 2 weeks. "No takers. Makes sense. Place is a money pit. Foundation's probably shot. No utilities. You'd spend 50 grand just making it livable." Marcus nodded slowly, but something stirred in his chest. 8,000. He had $8,700 in savings. 2 years of setting aside $20 here, $50 there. Money he'd been saving for something important. A real emergency. A chance. "Can I see the listing?" Marcus asked. Garrett raised an eyebrow but pulled out a flyer from behind the counter. Auction this Saturday, 10 a.m., County Courthouse. Cash or certified check only. Marcus stared at the grainy black and white photo of the chalet. Even in decay it was impressive. Steep roof lines, riverstone chimney, floor-to-ceiling windows on the upper level, and 15 acres. Land alone had to be worth something. "You thinking about it?" Garrett asked carefully. Marcus folded the flyer and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Maybe, just looking." Garrett's expression shifted to something close to concern. "Marcus, I've known you since you were in high school. I knew your wife. God rest her. And I'm telling you this as a friend. Don't throw your money away on a dream that'll bury you." Marcus met his eyes. "I appreciate that, Garrett. I really do. But sometimes dreams are all we've got left." That night, after Sophie and Jake were asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the flyer spread out in front of him. He'd Googled the property, pulled up old articles about Werner Haas, the Swiss businessman who'd built the chalet in 1982. Haas had been a banker, semi-retired, who'd moved to Colorado for privacy and mountain air. He'd lived there alone for 5 years before disappearing during a spring hike in March of 1987. Search and rescue found nothing, presumed dead in an avalanche. No family ever came forward. The property sat in legal limbo for years before the county finally took possession for unpaid taxes. Marcus pulled out his bank statement. $8,714.32. Everything he had. He thought about what Garrett said, about the foundation, the utilities, the $50,000 it would take to make it livable. But he also thought about the alternative, staying in this rental where the landlord raised rent every year. Watching his kids grow up in a bedroom meant for one, never having space, never having stability, never having a chance at something more. He thought about the land. 15 acres. Even if the house was unsalvageable, he could harvest the timber, sell the land, maybe double his money. Or he could live in it. Fix it slowly, room by room, the way he'd learned to fix everything else in his life. With patience, sweat, and stubborn hope. Sophie padded into the kitchen in her oversized sweater, hair messy from sleep. "Dad, you okay?" Marcus looked up, forcing a smile. "Yeah, baby. Just thinking." "About what?" She sat down across from him, eyes landing on the flyer, her brow furrowed. "That's that creepy house on the mountain, the one everyone says is haunted." Marcus chuckled. "You don't believe in haunted houses?" Sophie shrugged. "No, but I believe in houses that fall down." "Is that what you're thinking about? Buying that?" Marcus hesitated. "Maybe. We could live there. Fix it up. It'd be ours. No more rent, no more landlord telling us what we can and can't do. You could have your own room." Sophie's eyes widened slightly. "Really? My own room?" Marcus nodded. "And Jake could have his own room. And we'd have space, land, maybe even a workshop where I could build things to sell." Sophie bit her lip, the way her mother used to when she was thinking hard. "How much does it cost? 8,000. Do we have that?" "Barely," Marcus admitted. "It'd be everything we've saved. And if it doesn't work out, if the house is worse than I think, we'd be broke." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her small hand on his. "Mum used to say you could fix anything. Maybe you can fix that house too." Marcus's throat tightened. He squeezed her hand gently. "Get back to bed, sweetheart. School tomorrow." She stood, then paused. "Dad? If you think it's the right thing, then do it. We'll be okay either way. We always are." By Friday afternoon, word had spread through Pine Ridge that Marcus Reed was thinking about bidding on the Haas chalet. The reactions ranged from concern to outright mockery. His boss, Larry, a contractor who hired Marcus for bigger jobs, cornered him at a work site. "I heard you're going to that auction tomorrow." Marcus kept his eyes on the board he was cutting. "Might be." Larry shook his head. "Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you. That place is a teardown. The foundation's cracked. The roof's got holes. You'd be better off burning 8 grand in your fireplace. At least you'd get some heat out of it. Marcus set down his saw. Or I'd have a house. Larry laughed, not unkindly. You'd have a coffin. Look, I get it. You want something for your kids. But this ain't it. This is a rich man's folly that's been rotting for 30 years. You can't afford the risk. Marcus wiped sawdust from his hands. Maybe not, but I can't afford not to try either. At the coffee shop, Marcus overheard 2 women whispering. That's him. The one who's going to bid on the Haas place. Poor thing. Still hasn't recovered from losing Anne. Now he's going to lose his savings too. Someone should talk to him. At the school pickup, another parent approached him with practiced sympathy. Marcus, I heard about the auction. If you need to talk to someone, about making sound decisions during grief, there are resources. Marcus forced a polite smile. I appreciate the concern. Really, but I'm fine. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Marcus dressed in his only suit, a dark blue one he'd worn to Anne's funeral 4 years ago. It still fit, barely. He'd lost weight since then. He left Sophie and Jake with his neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, a Polish grandmother who fed them pierogi and taught them chess. The county courthouse was a squat brick building at the center of town. By the time Marcus arrived at 9:45, a small crowd had gathered. Mostly the curious, a few bargain hunters, and 3 actual bidders Marcus could identify. He recognized Tom Bellamy, a local real estate investor who bought and flipped properties. There was a woman he didn't know, well-dressed, probably from Denver, and himself. The auctioneer, a county official named Patricia Moreno, stood behind a folding table with a gavel and a bored expression. At exactly 10 a.m., she cleared her throat. Lot 47, the Haas estate, 15.3 acres, 1 primary structure, sold as is, no warranties, no inspections, starting bid $8,500. Marcus's heart pounded. They'd raised the minimum. He had $8,700, barely enough. Do I hear 8,500? Patricia called out. The crowd murmured. Marcus raised his hand. 8,500. Patricia nodded. 8,500. Do I hear 9? Silence. Tom Bellamy shook his head and walked away. The woman from Denver checked her phone and frowned. No other hands went up. Patricia looked almost disappointed. Going once at 8,500. Going twice. Marcus held his breath. The gavel came down. Sold to bidder 12 for $8,500. Just like that, it was over. Marcus Reed, single father, handyman, widower, had just bought 15 acres and a crumbling chalet with almost everything he had to his name. He felt dizzy. He felt terrified. He felt something else, too. Hope. As he walked out of the courthouse with the deed in his hand, he heard the whispers. He actually did it. Poor bastard. Give it 3 months before he's trying to unload it. What was he thinking? Marcus didn't turn around. He just kept walking. By Sunday afternoon, Marcus and the kids were standing in front of the chalet for the first time as its owners. The drive up had been an adventure in itself. The private road was worse than he'd expected, full of potholes and washed-out sections. His truck barely made it. But when they rounded the final curve and the chalet came into view through the pines, Jake gasped. Whoa. It's huge. It was. 3 stories of timber and stone built into the mountainside like it had grown there. The roof sagged in places, and several windows were broken, boards nailed haphazardly across them. Graffiti tagged the lower walls. Spray-painted declarations of love and rebellion from teenagers who'd used it as a party spot over the years. The deck had partially collapsed, but the bones were there, solid timber construction, Riverstone chimney rising like a monument, and all around them towering pines and silence. "This is ours?" Sophie asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "This is ours." They approached carefully. Marcus had the keys the county had given him, though he wasn't sure they'd work. The front door was massive, carved wood with tarnished brass hardware. He slid the key in. It turned. The door swung open with a groan that echoed through the forest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and age. The entry hall was grand, even in decay. A curved staircase led to the upper floors. To the left, a living room with a floor-to-ceiling stone fireplace. To the right, what must have been a dining room. Straight ahead, a kitchen frozen in 1980s style. Fake wood paneling, harvest gold appliances, linoleum curling at the edges. Everything was covered in dust. Water damage stained the ceilings. Small animal droppings littered the floors. But there was also furniture. A couch, rotted and mouse-eaten. A dining table, solid oak beneath the grime. Bookshelves still lined with books, their pages swollen with moisture. "Can we explore?" Jake asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Stay together," Marcus said, "and don't touch anything that looks unstable." They moved through the house like archaeologists in a tomb. Upstairs, they found 4 bedrooms. The master's suite was enormous, with its own fireplace and a balcony overlooking the valley. 2 of the other bedrooms were smaller but still larger than anything the kids had ever had. The 4th appeared to have been an office. A desk sat near the window, papers scattered across it, faded and illegible. Sophie wandered into what would become her room. She stood at the broken window, looking out at the pine trees. "I could put my bed here," she said softly. "And maybe some shelves. We could fix the window, make it beautiful again." Marcus stood in the doorway watching her. "Yeah, baby, we could." Jake was in his chosen room, already narrating an elaborate story about how this was his fortress and he was a knight protecting the kingdom. Marcus smiled despite the overwhelming sense of what he'd taken on. This wasn't just a house. It was a project that would take years. Money he didn't have, skills he'd have to learn. But it was theirs. They made their way back to the master bedroom. Marcus tested the floorboards, checked the walls. Structurally, it seemed sound. The roof damage was mostly cosmetic. The foundation, from what he could see, had held up. Maybe Larry was wrong. Maybe this was salvageable. That's when Sophie noticed it. "Dad, what's this?" She was standing near the far wall, running her hand along the paneling. Marcus walked over. There was a seam, barely visible. He pressed his palm against it. The wall was different here. Cooler, more solid. He knocked. The sound echoed hollow everywhere except this section. Here, it was dense. Heavy. "What is it?" Sophie asked. Marcus traced the seam with his fingers. It ran from floor to ceiling, about 4 feet wide. There was no handle, no obvious way to open it. But there was something else. Near the top, a small panel, almost invisible in the wood grain. He pressed it. Nothing. Tried sliding it. Nothing. Then he pushed and turned. It clicked. The seam shifted. Just an inch, but enough to reveal what was behind the wall. A door. But not just any door. This was heavy steel, painted to look like wood. And in the center was a lock, not a regular door lock. Something else, something serious. "What is it?" Jake asked, having joined them. Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but whoever built this didn't want people getting in. They spent the rest of the afternoon trying to open it." Marcus tried prying, tried finding another release mechanism, tried everything he could think of. Nothing worked. As the sun began to set and shadows filled the empty house, they packed up to leave. "We'll come back next weekend," Marcus promised. "Start cleaning up. Maybe figure out what's behind that door." On the drive down the mountain, Jake fell asleep against Sophie's shoulder. Sophie stared out the window. "Dad?" "Yeah?" Why would someone lock a door like that, inside their own house? Marcus kept his eyes on the deteriorating road. "I don't know, baby. Maybe they had something valuable, or maybe they just wanted privacy." "Or maybe," she said quietly, "they were hiding something." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her mother's daughter, always thinking, always questioning. Maybe, he agreed. But whatever it is, it's been locked up for over 30 years. Probably nothing but old papers or memories. But he didn't believe that, and judging by the look on Sophie's face, neither did she. That night, Marcus lay on his mattress in the dark, unable to sleep. His mind kept returning to that door, to the weight of it, the deliberate concealment. Werner Haas had built that, had sealed something away, and then he'd vanished into the mountains, never to return. What had he been hiding? Why go to such lengths? Marcus pulled out his phone and Googled Werner Haas again. Found the same articles, the same sparse information. Swiss banker, semi-retired, moved to Colorado in 1982, disappeared March 1987, presumed dead, no family, estate abandoned. But there had to be more. People didn't build vault doors in their bedrooms for no reason. People didn't just vanish without leaving traces. Marcus scrolled through page after page of search results until his eyes burned. And then, on the 7th page of results, he found something. A small article from a Swiss newspaper dated March 1987. Translated awkwardly by an online tool, it read, Werner Haas, former executive of Zurich Private Banking, reported missing in Colorado. Haas left Switzerland in 1982 amid rumors of client disputes. Nature of disputes never made public. Family declined comment. Client disputes. Marcus sat up, heart beating faster. What kind of disputes? He searched for more, but found nothing. Whatever had happened was buried under decades and discretion. But it meant something. It meant Werner Haas hadn't just been a quiet banker seeking mountain solitude. He'd been running from something, or protecting something. Monday morning, Marcus dropped the kids at school and drove straight back to the hardware store. Garrett looked up when he walked in, eyebrows raised. Heard you actually bought that place? Marcus nodded. I need supplies. Lots of them. Cleaning supplies, basic tools, maybe some lumber to start boarding up properly. Garrett walked around the counter. Marcus, level with me. What are you going to do with that place? Fix it up, Marcus said. Live in it. Give my kids a real home. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right, I'll give you contractor pricing. And I've got some surplus materials out back you can have. Leftovers from jobs. Won't charge you for those. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Garrett, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, Garrett interrupted. But Anne used to babysit my granddaughter. And you're a good man in a bad situation, so let me help. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Thank you. That week, Marcus spent every spare moment at the chalet. Before work, after work, long into the evenings with a headlamp strapped to his forehead. He cleared debris, swept floors, documented damage, and every night before he left, he spent 20 minutes staring at that locked door. He'd tried everything he could think of. He'd called a locksmith from 2 towns over, but when the guy saw the door, he just whistled low. This is military grade, he'd said. Bank vault quality. I couldn't crack this if I had a month. Marcus had sent him away. On Friday night, 1 week after buying the chalet, Marcus sat in the master bedroom with his back against the vault door. Sophie and Jake were with Mrs. Kowalski for the night. He was alone with his thoughts and his growing obsession. There was something behind this door, something important, something worth protecting with steel and secrecy, and he was going to find out what it was. He just didn't know yet that what he found would change everything, would expose secrets buried for over 30 years, would transform him from a struggling handyman into something else entirely, would force him to choose between easy wealth and hard integrity, would make him an enemy to some and a hero to others. All he knew, sitting there in the dark, was that his life had already changed the moment he'd signed that deed. The moment he'd chosen to bet everything on a broken dream and a locked door. And there was no going back now. Only forward, into whatever waited in the darkness behind that steel. Marcus Reed learned quickly that renovating a 30-year-old abandoned chalet with $200 to his name required more creativity than money. He couldn't afford new materials, so he salvaged. Ripped out water-damaged drywall and saved the studs, pulled rusty nails and straightened them for reuse. Every weekend became a lesson in making something from nothing, and Sophie and Jake became his apprentices in the art of survival disguised as construction. October arrived with morning frost and the smell of pine needles sharp in the mountain air. Marcus had managed to make the chalet's lower level barely habitable. He'd patched the worst roof leaks with salvaged shingles and tar paper, boarded the broken windows properly, cleared out years of animal nests and debris. It wasn't pretty, but it was progress. And every night, after the kids fell asleep in their sleeping bags near the fireplace, Marcus would climb the stairs to the master bedroom and sit in front of that locked door, running his hands along the seams, searching for something he couldn't name. His boss, Larry, gave him extra hours, probably out of pity more than need. Marcus worked on a deck restoration for a family whose vacation home sat empty 11 months a year. While he replaced boards and refinished railings, his mind wandered back to the chalet, to that door, to Werner Hyas's unexplained disappearance. The family's teenage son came out one afternoon, skateboard under his arm. "My dad says you bought that haunted house up on Ridgeline." Marcus kept his eyes on his work. "It's not haunted, just old." The kid shrugged. "My friends and I used to party there sometimes. Before you bought it. Sorry about the graffiti." Marcus looked up. "You ever see anything weird there?" "Like what?" "I don't know," Marcus said carefully. "Anything that seemed off, out of place?" The kid thought for a moment. "There was this one room upstairs we could never get into, locked solid. We figured maybe someone died in there or something, but mostly it was just empty. Sad, you know? Like someone left in a hurry and never came back." Marcus filed that information away. Someone left in a hurry. Werner Haas had disappeared during a hike. Search and rescue found his car at a trailhead, found nothing else. The assumption had been avalanche, but what if it was something else? What if he'd meant to disappear? By mid-October, Marcus had started sleeping at the chalet on weekends. It was cheaper than running the heat in the rental, and it meant more time to work. Sophie had claimed the bedroom with the best view. Jake had taken the one closest to his dad's. They'd hauled up their mattresses in the truck bed, along with a propane heater Garrett had donated. It wasn't much, but it was starting to feel like home. One Saturday morning, while Marcus worked on repairing the stone fireplace in the living room, he noticed something odd. One of the river stones, about chest height, sat slightly proud of the others. He'd assumed it was just poor craftsmanship, but when he touched it, it shifted. His heart rate picked up. He pressed harder. The stone moved inward with a soft click. Behind it, a small cavity opened. Inside, wrapped in oiled leather, was a book. Marcus's hands trembled as he pulled it out. The leather was worn but intact, protecting what was inside. He unwrapped it carefully. A journal, hardbound, about the size of a paperback novel. The first page had one line written in neat, precise handwriting. Private record of Werner Haas. Begun January 1982. Marcus sat back on his heels, dust covering his jeans, the journal resting in his palms like something sacred. Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Dad, what's that?" Marcus looked up at his daughter, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, one of Anne's old flannel shirts rolled up at the sleeves. "Come here," he said softly. She crossed the room and knelt beside him. He showed her the hidden cavity, the leather wrapping, the journal. This belonged to the man who built this house, the one who disappeared. Sophie's eyes widened. "What does it say?" Marcus opened to the first entry. January 3rd, 1982. Arrived in Pine Ridge today. The isolation is exactly what I need, what my clients need. Zurich became impossible. Too many questions. Too many people noticing patterns. Colorado offers distance and discretion. The chalet construction begins next week. I've designed specific features for security. No one will find what I'm protecting unless I want them to." Marcus looked at Sophie. What was he protecting? She whispered. He flipped through pages. Werner's handwriting filled every page, sometimes in English, occasionally slipping into German. The entries were meticulous. Detailed accounts of the chalet's construction, notes about materials, workers, timelines, but also cryptic references that made Marcus's pulse quicken. March 19th, 1982. The vault installation complete. Contractor believes it's for wine storage. Let him think that. The real purpose is far more valuable. June 2nd, 1982. Another deposit secured. Family fleeing Prague. Their wealth, their future, now in my care. I sleep better knowing I can protect what others would steal. September 27th, 1982. Moved primary storage to the vault. The assets now total over 40 million. If anything happens to me, if the political situation changes, if my past catches up, at least this will be safe. At least I'll have done something that matters. Marcus read passage after passage, his mind racing. Werner Haas hadn't just been a banker. He'd been protecting people's wealth, families fleeing political persecution, their assets hidden away in this remote Colorado chalet. But why? And from whom? Jake bounded into the room, cheeks flushed from playing outside. "Dad, I found a weird fountain thing out back. It's all filled with dirt and pine needles." Marcus barely heard him. He was reading an entry from December 1986. The list grows longer. 12 families now. Their combined assets under my protection total 180 million. Some days I feel like Noah, building an ark for wealth instead of animals, saving what I can from the flood of politics and greed. But I'm tired. The isolation is heavy, and I fear my past in Zurich may have followed me after all. I've received letters, questions, people asking about accounts that should have been forgotten. If they come, if they find me, the vault must remain secret. Everything depends on it. Marcus closed the journal, his hands shaking. Sophie stared at him. "Dad, there's money here," Marcus said quietly. "A lot of money, hidden somewhere in this house, probably behind that locked door." Sophie's mouth opened. "How much?" He met her eyes. "If Werner's numbers are right, maybe $200 million, maybe more." The room fell silent except for the wind outside and Jake humming to himself as he explored. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not real. That's like movie money." Marcus stood, clutching the journal. "I know. But Werner was careful, detailed. He documented everything. Why would he lie in a private journal no one was supposed to find?" "What do we do?" Sophie asked. Marcus looked toward the stairs, toward the master bedroom, toward that locked door that suddenly felt less like an obstacle and more like a threshold. "We find a way in." That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus read through the entire journal by flashlight. Werner's entries painted a picture of a man carrying an enormous burden. He'd helped families escape communist regimes in Eastern Europe during the 1980s. Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany. Wealthy families who needed to move their assets quietly, secretly, before governments seized everything. Werner had connections from his banking days in Zurich. He'd created a network, a way to protect wealth until families could safely reclaim it. But then Werner had started receiving threats, warnings. Someone knew what he was doing, knew where he was. The final entry was dated March 14th, 1987, just days before Werner disappeared. "They've found me. A car passed the chalet twice today, watching. I recognized the driver from Zurich, one of Kessler's men. I should have known he wouldn't let this go. The money I helped move, it wasn't all clean. Some of Kessler's clients were criminals hiding assets. When I refused to give him access codes when I disappeared, I became a liability. I'm leaving tomorrow, heading into the mountains. If I don't return, if something happens, I hope whoever finds this place understands what I tried to do. The vault code is hidden where water meets stone. The assets belong to the families I protected. Let them reclaim what's theirs. I only wanted to help. I hope that counts for something. Marcus set down the journal, his mind spinning. Werner hadn't died in an avalanche. He'd been running, hiding, and he'd hidden the code to the vault before he left, where water meets stone. Marcus thought about the chalet's design. There was a creek that ran along the eastern boundary of the property. There were river stones throughout the house, in the fireplace, in the foundation. Water meets stone could mean anything. But then he remembered what Jake had said. The fountain. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and headed outside. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead. He made his way around to the back of the chalet, where the forest pressed close. There, half buried in years of fallen pine needles and debris, was an old fountain. It was simple, just a circular stone basin about 4 feet across, with a central pedestal that must have once held a statue or spout. Marcus knelt and began clearing away the debris, dirt, needles, small animal bones, decades of neglect. His fingers scraped against stone until he reached the bottom of the basin. And there, set into the base of the central pedestal, was a small metal panel. His breath caught. He brushed away the remaining dirt. The panel was about 6 inches square, made of brass or copper, weathered but intact, and in the center was a tiny keyhole. Marcus pulled out his keys, tried the main house key. Too big. Tried others from his keychain. Nothing fit. He sat back, frustrated. Then he remembered the journal's leather wrapping. He'd left it inside. Marcus ran back to the house, careful not to wake the kids, grabbed the leather, examined it closely. There, stitched into the inner lining, was a small, hard shape. He cut the stitching carefully. A key fell into his palm. Tiny, ornate, old. Back at the fountain, his hands shook as he inserted the key into the panel. It turned with a soft click. The panel popped open. Inside was a small waterproof container. Inside that, a piece of paper. Werner's handwriting, still clear despite the years. Vault code 8-16-42-4-67. Use in sequence. Combination lock behind bedroom panel. God forgive me for what I've done and what I've failed to do. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus stood in the master bedroom at 2 a.m, a piece of paper with 5 numbers clutched in his hand, staring at the vault door that had haunted his dreams for weeks. 8-16-42-4-67. Combination lock behind bedroom panel. He'd searched every inch of the wall around the door, found nothing. Then he'd remembered the small panel near the top, the one he'd pressed weeks ago that had revealed the door's seam. He pressed it again. This time, knowing what to look for, he noticed a second panel to its left, barely visible. He pressed and slid it sideways. It opened to reveal a mechanical combination lock, the kind you'd find on a safe. 5 rotating wheels, each numbered 0 through 99. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The moment that would either prove Werner's journal was real or reveal it as the fantasy of a paranoid man. He set the first dial to 8, then 16, 42, 4, 67. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, deep within the wall, something groaned. Mechanical sounds, heavy and old, like a bank vault from another era. Locks disengaging, tumblers falling into place. Marcus stepped back. The door shifted, just an inch. Then another. Cool air rushed out, decades-old atmosphere finally meeting the outside world. The door swung inward, revealing darkness. And stairs. Stone steps leading down into the earth. Marcus stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to wake Sophie, call someone, do anything but descend into an unknown space alone in the middle of the night. But curiosity and desperation won out. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped through. The stairs were steep, carved from solid rock. They descended about 15 feet before opening into a room. Marcus's flashlight beam swept across the space, and his breath stopped. The room was roughly 30 feet by 20 feet, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the chalet. The walls were lined with metal shelving units and safety deposit boxes, dozens of them, maybe over 100. In the center of the room sat a heavy wooden table. On it, organized in neat stacks, were documents, folders, ledgers, and a large manila envelope with instructions written across it in Werner's handwriting. Marcus moved like he was in a dream. He approached the nearest safety deposit box. It had a small key lock and a label, Prague Family, March 1982. His hands shook as he tried the door. Locked, of course, but there on the table was a small wooden box. Inside, organized on a labeled ring, were dozens of tiny keys. Marcus found the one marked Prague, inserted it. The box opened. Inside were stacks of cash, Swiss francs, bundled and pristine, wrapped in archival paper, also gold coins in sealed containers, and a folded letter. Marcus unfolded it with trembling fingers. To whom it may concern, these assets belong to the Kovac family of Prague. Fled Czechoslovakia, March 1982. If you are reading this, Werner Haas is deceased. Please use the documentation provided to locate family members or their descendants. These assets are their rightful property. Signed, Werner Haas. Marcus moved to the next box. Romania family, June 1982. Inside, more currency, bearer bonds, diamonds in certified packets, another letter with instructions. He opened box after box, each one the same. Families from Eastern Europe, wealth preserved, letters of explanation, instructions for return. His legs felt weak. He sat down heavily on the stone floor, back against the cold wall. This was real, all of it. Werner Haas had been telling the truth. Marcus pulled out his phone. No service this deep underground. He made his way back up the stairs on shaky legs. In the bedroom, he sat on the dusty floor and tried to process what he'd just seen. Millions of dollars, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, exactly as Werner had written. Hidden beneath a chalet Marcus had bought for $8,500. Money that belonged to families who might not even know it existed. Families whose parents or grandparents had fled persecution 40 years ago. Marcus thought about keeping it. The thought came unbidden but honest. With that money, he could pay off Anne's medical debt, buy a real house, send his kids to college, live without the constant weight of choosing between groceries and electricity. But then he thought about Werner's letters, the meticulous care he'd taken, the trust these families had placed in him, and he thought about Sophie's words from weeks ago. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. This wasn't his money. Legally, it might be. Finders keepers, abandoned property, all that. But morally, ethically, it belonged to people who'd lost everything and trusted one man to keep their future safe. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in the bedroom, watching dawn break over the pine forest, and made a decision that would change everything. At 7 a.m., he woke the kids. "We need to talk," he said. They gathered around the propane heater. Sophie and Jake wrapped in sleeping bags, hair messy, eyes curious. "Dad, what's wrong?" Sophie asked. Marcus took a breath. "You know that locked door? I found a way in." Jake perked up. "What was inside? Treasure?" Marcus smiled, despite himself. "Yeah, buddy, treasure." He explained everything. The journal, the code, the vault, the safety deposit boxes, the money, the families, the choice he now faced. When he finished, Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "How much money?" she finally asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know exactly. Werner's last count was over 180 million. That was 1986. With interest, investments, It could be way more now. Jake's eyes were huge. We're rich. No, Marcus said firmly. We're not. This money isn't ours. But, Sophie started, you bought the house. Legally, doesn't that mean? Legally, maybe, Marcus interrupted, but not morally. These families trusted Werner. He died protecting their wealth. I'm not going to steal it just because I found it. What are you going to do? Sophie asked. Marcus rubbed his face. I don't know yet. I need help. Legal help. Someone who can figure out how to do this right. Someone we can trust. Monday morning, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 4 years. Larry didn't believe him, but didn't push. Marcus drove 3 hours to Denver with the journal and copies of several documents from the vault. He'd found a lawyer through careful online research, Evelyn Park, an estate attorney with a reputation for handling complex international cases. Her office was in a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and money Marcus didn't have. The receptionist looked at his work boots and stained jacket with barely concealed disdain. I have an appointment, Marcus said, with Evelyn Park. She checked her computer. Mr. Reed, please have a seat. 15 minutes later, he was shown into an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Evelyn Park was in her 50s, Korean-American, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Reed, she said, gesturing to a chair, you said on the phone this was urgent and unusual. That's putting it mildly. Marcus sat, handed her the journal. I bought an abandoned house, found this hidden inside. Then I found what the journal was talking about. Evelyn opened the journal, began reading. Her expression shifted from polite interest to sharp focus. She read for 10 minutes without speaking, then looked up. You found a vault full of assets belonging to families from the 1980s. Marcus nodded. I've documented everything, taken photos. I haven't touched anything except to open the boxes and read the letters. I need to know what my legal obligations are and how to return this money to the rightful owners. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Most people in your situation would be asking how to keep it, not return it. Marcus met her eyes. I'm not most people. I've got 2 kids who need to learn that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Claire, cancel my afternoon appointments. She hung up and looked at Marcus. Tell me everything. Marcus spent the next 3 hours laying out the entire story. The auction, the chalet, the locked door, Werner's journal, the vault, the families, the letters, everything. Evelyn took notes, asked pointed questions, examined every document Marcus had brought. Finally, she sat back. This is extraordinary and complicated. Legally, abandoned property laws vary. The fact that you purchased the house in a legitimate transaction gives you ownership of the structure and potentially its contents. But, she held up a hand, this money was never abandoned in the traditional sense. It was deliberately hidden, protected, intended for specific people. Werner Haas created what amounts to a private trust, even if it wasn't formally established through legal channels. So what does that mean? Marcus asked. It means, Evelyn said carefully, you could legally claim it, fight any challenges, probably win. The families have no proof, no paperwork in their names, no way to establish ownership after 40 years. Courts would likely rule in your favor. Marcus felt his stomach sink. But, Evelyn continued, there's a difference between legal and ethical. And there's a third option, which is, you honor Werner's intent. We track down the families or their descendants, establish a framework for verification and return, document everything meticulously, make this transparent and right. Marcus leaned forward. How do we do that? Evelyn smiled, and it was genuine. Carefully, methodically, and with the understanding that you're about to become either very respected or very hated, possibly both. Over the next week, Evelyn worked with Marcus to create a plan. They would inventory everything in the vault, verify Werner's documentation, begin the process of locating the families he'd listed. It would take time, months, maybe years, and it would require Marcus to secure the vault, protect the assets, and resist the temptation that would come when word inevitably got out. Because word always got out. The first hint came from an unexpected source. Marcus's boss Larry stopped by the chalet on a Saturday morning, supposedly to drop off some surplus lumber, but his eyes kept drifting to the house, calculating. "Heard you've been spending a lot of time here," Larry said. "Must be making good progress." Marcus kept his expression neutral. Slow but steady. Larry nodded. "Also heard you took a day off, drove to Denver, had a meeting with some fancy lawyer." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Where'd you hear that?" Larry shrugged. "Small town. People talk. Your neighbor mentioned seeing you all dressed up heading out early. I'm just saying if you found something valuable, maybe we could work something out. I've got connections. Could help you move things quietly." Marcus set down his hammer. "I appreciate the offer, but there's nothing to move." Larry's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sure, just. If that changes, you let me know. I've been good to you, Marcus. Given you work when others wouldn't. Remember that." He left, and Marcus felt the first cold finger of fear. If Larry was asking questions, others would too. That night, Marcus lay awake in the master bedroom, listening to the old house settle around him. Sophie and Jake slept soundly in their rooms, exhausted from a day of cleaning and exploring. Downstairs, the vault sat sealed behind its hidden door, holding secrets and wealth that could either save them or destroy them. Marcus thought about Werner Haas, about a man who'd tried to do right and ended up running for his life, about families who'd lost everything except what one banker had promised to protect, about the weight of being trusted with something bigger than yourself. He thought about Anne, his wife, gone 4 years now but still present in every decision he made. She'd been the ethical center of their family, the one who always chose kindness over convenience. If she were here, what would she say? He knew the answer. She'd tell him to do what was right, even if it was hard. Especially if it was hard. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Pine trees swayed in the moonlight. Somewhere out there, in countries he'd never visited, were people who had no idea their grandparents had hidden wealth in a Colorado mountain. People who might be struggling just like him. People who deserved to know their family's sacrifice had meant something. He couldn't steal that from them. Wouldn't. Even if it meant staying broke. Even if it meant danger. Even if it meant the whole town thought he was crazy. Because Sophie and Jake were watching, learning, becoming who they'd be based on who he chose to be right now. And he'd rather raise kids who knew their father was honest than kids who lived in a mansion built on theft. The decision crystallized in that moment. He would return the money. All of it. No matter what it cost him. Werner Haas had died protecting these assets. The least Marcus could do was honor that sacrifice. He just had no idea yet how many people would try to stop him, or how far they'd go to take what wasn't theirs. But that he'd learn soon enough. By the 3rd week of November, Marcus Reed had learned that secrets in small towns have a half-life measured in hours, not days. He'd been careful, told no one except Evelyn Park about the vault's contents, but careful wasn't enough. Pine Ridge had a way of sensing when something big was happening, like animals before an earthquake, and the questions had started. First came the contractors. Marcus had hired 2 local guys to help repair the chalet's roof, paying them from his dwindling savings. They were good workers, quiet, professional. But on their 4th day, the older one, a man named Derek, had cornered Marcus by the tool shed. "My cousin works at the county records office," Derek said, not looking Marcus in the eye. "Said you've been making calls, asking about property history going back to the 80s. Said you've had lawyers calling too. Big Denver firm." Marcus kept his expression neutral. Just doing my due diligence, making sure there aren't any liens or claims on the property. Derek nodded slowly. Right. Due diligence. It's just, well, people are wondering why you'd spend that kind of money on lawyers for a house you bought for $8,000. Unless you found something. Marcus met his gaze. I found a lot of work that needs doing. That's what I found. Derek didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. Then came the visit from Mayor Patricia Henderson. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon in her personal car, not the official town vehicle, wearing jeans instead of her usual business attire. The informality was deliberate, calculated. "Marcus," she called out, stepping carefully over the debris in the front yard. "Got a minute?" He climbed down from the ladder where he'd been replacing gutter sections. "Mayor, what brings you out here?" Patricia smiled, the practiced expression of someone who'd won 4 elections by knowing exactly how to read people. "Just wanted to see how our newest property owner is settling in. The place is looking better already." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "Thanks. It's getting there." Patricia walked a slow circle, taking in the repairs, the fresh boards, the work in progress. "You know, there's been some talk in town. People are curious. You spent your life savings on this place, working yourself to exhaustion, but you also hired a high-powered attorney from Denver. Makes folks wonder if maybe you stumbled onto something valuable." Marcus's jaw tightened. People should mind their own business. The mayor's smile didn't waver. In a town this size, everyone's business is everyone's business. Now, I'm not here to pry, but I am here to remind you that if you did find something of significant value, there could be tax implications, historical preservation issues, maybe even claims from previous owners or their estates. It would be in your best interest to be transparent with the town council. Marcus crossed his arms. "I appreciate the advice, but I'm handling things through proper legal channels." Patricia's expression cooled slightly. "I'm sure you are. Just remember, Marcus, Pine Ridge takes care of its own, but it also expects its own to contribute back. If you've come into good fortune, the community that supported you might expect to share in that." She left him with that thinly veiled threat hanging in the cold November air. That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus called Evelyn Park from the one spot on the property where his phone got decent reception. "Word's getting out," he said without preamble. "How fast?" Evelyn asked. "Fast enough. Mayor came by today, contractors asking questions. My boss has been fishing for information." "What do I do?" Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "We accelerate the timeline. I've been researching the families Werner listed. I've found preliminary information on 6 of them, descendants in 3 cases. We need to start documenting everything in the vault, creating an itemized inventory, establishing the paper trail before someone tries to challenge your ownership or claim the assets themselves." Marcus looked back at the dark shape of the chalet. "How long will that take?" "Weeks if we're thorough," Evelyn said. "But here's the thing, Marcus. Once we start contacting these families, once we make this official, there's no going back. You'll be choosing transparency over possession. Are you absolutely certain that's what you want? Because the moment this becomes public knowledge, you're going to face pressure you can't imagine." Marcus thought about the journal he kept under his mattress, about Werner Hayase's final words, about the families who'd trusted a stranger to protect their future. "I'm certain," he said. "Then we start Monday," Evelyn replied. "And Marcus?" "Yeah? Get a security system. Cameras, motion sensors, the kind of money you're sitting on, it makes people desperate. Desperate people do stupid things." Evelyn arrived at the chalet the following Monday with 2 assistants, a photographer, and enough documentation equipment to fill a small moving truck. Sophie and Jake were at school. Marcus had taken the day off work, telling Larry he had personal business to handle. They spent 12 hours in the vault, Evelyn directing, the photographer documenting, Marcus carefully opening each safety deposit box while one assistant logged every item. Box 1, Prague family. Evelyn read from Werner's ledger. Kovac family. Fled March 1982. Marcus opened it. Inside, bundled Swiss francs totaling approximately 200,000. 10 gold Krugerrands. Bearer bonds valued at 500,000. Certified diamonds, approximately 50 carats, value estimated at 1.2 million. The photographer captured everything from multiple angles. The assistant typed details into a laptop. They moved to the next box, and the next. By hour 6, the scope of what Werner had protected became staggeringly clear. Box after box, family after family. Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, East Germany, Poland. Wealth hidden away before communist governments could seize it. Some boxes held cash, others held bonds, gold, jewelry, art appraisals for paintings too large to store in the vault but documented with photos and descriptions. By the time they finished, Evelyn's preliminary total made Marcus sit down hard on the stone floor. "Conservative estimate," she said, reviewing her tablet. $260 million. That's accounting for currency exchange, inflation, estimated current value of commodities and bonds. Some of these bearer bonds have matured multiple times over. The diamonds alone are worth 40 million at current market rates. Marcus put his head in his hands. Jesus. Evelyn crouched beside him. "There's more you need to know. I found documentation of Werner's original agreements with these families. He was operating as an unofficial private banker. These people couldn't use traditional banks because their governments monitored everything. Werner offered them safety, secrecy, and he never took a commission. Not $1. Every cent in this vault belongs to someone else." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why would he do all this for free?" Evelyn showed him a letter she'd found in Werner's desk. It was addressed to no one, dated January 1982. "My father died in Dachau. My mother escaped to Switzerland with nothing but the clothes she wore. A banker in Zurich helped her, took her jewelry, kept it safe, returned it when the war ended. He asked for nothing. He said some things are more important than profit. I learned that lesson young. Now it's my turn to be that banker for someone else's desperate mother. This is how we survive, by helping each other survive." Marcus read the letter twice, his throat tight. He was paying it forward. "Exactly," Evelyn said. "And now you have to decide how to honor that." Over the next week, Evelyn worked to trace Werner's 12 families. It was detective work that required international calls, genealogy databases, and patience. Marcus continued working on the chalet during the day, spending nights in the vault with Evelyn and her team. Sophie and Jake knew something big was happening, but Marcus had asked them to keep it quiet at school. Jake managed for 3 days. Then he told his best friend that his dad had found buried treasure. By Thursday, the story had spread through Pine Ridge Elementary like wildfire. Marcus got a call from Sophie's teacher. "Mr. Reed, I hope you don't mind me asking, but Sophie's been very distracted lately. Some of the other children are saying you found money in your house. Is everything all right at home?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Everything's fine. The kids are just excited about the renovation. We've found some old things. Nothing dramatic." The teacher sounded unconvinced. "Of course. Well, if there's anything the school can help with, please let us know." That afternoon, when Marcus picked up the kids, a group of parents stared at him, whispered. One approached. "Marcus, hi. I'm Jennifer, Tyler's mum. I just wanted to say, if the rumors are true about you finding something valuable, that's wonderful. Really, it couldn't have happened to a more deserving family." Marcus forced a smile. "Thanks, but it's just rumors. People always exaggerate." Jennifer nodded too quickly. "Oh, of course. It's just, if you ever wanted to invest locally, my husband runs a construction company. We'd love to discuss opportunities." Marcus extracted himself as politely as he could. But the message was clear. The town knew, or thought they knew, and everyone wanted a piece. By early December, the pressure had intensified to a level Marcus hadn't anticipated. Someone broke a window at the chalet. Nothing was stolen because the vault was too well hidden and secured, but the message was clear. Someone was testing defenses. Then came the letter. Plain envelope, no return address, left in Marcus's mailbox at the rental house. Inside, a single typed page. You don't know what you have. You don't understand who those assets belong to. Some of Werner's clients were not innocent refugees. Some were moving money for criminal organizations, people who will come looking, people who don't negotiate. If you're smart, you'll walk away. Sell the property. Forget what you found. This is your only warning. Marcus showed it to Evelyn. She called the police. Sheriff Tom Bradley came to take the report, a man in his 50s who'd known Marcus since high school. "This is concerning," he said, examining the letter. "But without a specific threat or signature, there's not much I can do. File a report, increase patrols near your property, but—" He paused. "Marcus, level with me. Did you find something in that house?" Marcus had debated this moment for weeks. Sheriff Bradley was honest, trustworthy, but he was also part of the town's power structure. Still, Marcus needed allies more than secrets. "Yeah," he said. "I found something." Bradley's expression didn't change. "Money? Assets belonging to people who fled Eastern Europe in the 80s. A lot of it, hidden by the previous owner. I'm working with a lawyer to return it to the rightful families." Bradley whistled low. "How much we talking?" $260 million, give or take. The sheriff sat down heavily on the chalet's front steps. "You're sitting on $250 million and you're planning to give it away." Marcus sat beside him. "It's not mine to keep." Bradley stared out at the pine trees. "You're either the most honest man I've ever met or the craziest." "Maybe both," Marcus admitted. Bradley turned to look at him. "You need protection. Real protection. This letter isn't a bluff. If there's criminal money mixed in with legitimate assets, you've got people who'll kill to keep it buried or steal it for themselves." "What do you suggest?" Marcus asked. "I suggest you hire private security. Install cameras everywhere, and let me assign a deputy to regular patrols. Also," he added, "you need to go public. The longer this stays in shadow, the more dangerous it gets. Transparency is your best defense." Marcus nodded slowly. "My lawyer said the same thing." "Then listen to her," Bradley said. "Get ahead of this. Tell your story before someone else tells it for you." Evelyn agreed. They scheduled a press conference for the following week at the chalet. It would be small, local media only, but it would establish the facts before rumors spiraled further. In the meantime, Evelyn's research had borne fruit. She'd located descendants of 4 families. The Kovacs, now living in Prague and Chicago. The Constantinescu family, descendants in Bucharest and Atlanta. The Nowak family, scattered between Poland and New York. The Richter family, in Berlin and Los Angeles. Each family had been contacted carefully, told that assets belonging to their ancestors had been discovered, asked to provide documentation of their lineage. The responses had been overwhelming. One woman, Petra Kovac, granddaughter of the original family who'd fled Czechoslovakia, called Evelyn crying. "My grandmother told me stories," Petra said through tears, "about the banker in Switzerland who helped them, who took their money, their jewelry, everything they had left. She died thinking it was lost forever. Stolen. This means—" Her voice broke. "This means my grandmother's sacrifice meant something." Another descendant, Anton Constantinescu, flew from Romania to meet with Evelyn in person. He brought papers, photos, documentation, proving his grandmother had entrusted nearly $3 million worth of assets to Werner Haas in 1983. "I never believed the story," Anton admitted. "I thought my grandmother had invented it. A fairy tale to cope with what she'd lost. But it was real." Evelyn showed him photographs of the safety deposit box labeled Constantinescu, documented the contents. Anton wept openly. Marcus was present for several of these meetings, watched grown men and women discover that their family history wasn't just loss and escape, that someone had kept a promise, had protected what mattered. It solidified his resolve, but it also painted a larger target on his back. Not everyone was happy about the discovery. A man showed up at the chalet claiming to be Werner Haas's nephew. His name was Richard Haas, and he arrived with a lawyer and documentation that looked official. "I'm Werner's brother's son," Richard announced, "which means I have legal claim to his estate. Anything found on this property rightfully belongs to his bloodline." Marcus, Evelyn, and Sheriff Bradley met with him in the chalet's living room. Evelyn examined his documents. "These are forged," she said flatly. "Werner Haas had no siblings. His parents died in the Holocaust. He had no living relatives." "That's what he told people," Richard insisted, "but family records show otherwise." Evelyn handed him a folder. "These are Werner's actual immigration records. Birth certificate, genealogical documentation. He was an only child. His entire family was killed except for his mother, who died in 1968. You're lying to claim assets that don't belong to you." Richard's lawyer stood. "We'll be filing a legal challenge. This property and its contents are disputed assets." "Be my guest," Evelyn said coldly. "Commit fraud in writing. Make it easier to prosecute you." They left, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be the last challenge. Then came the politicians. A state representative, William Carson, requested a meeting. He arrived in an expensive suit with 2 aides and a folder full of legal precedents. "Mr. Reed," Carson began, sitting in the chalet's renovated kitchen, "what you've found represents significant value. Value that could benefit the state of Colorado. There are legal mechanisms for claiming abandoned property for public use, infrastructure, education. You'd be compensated, of course, but the assets would serve the greater good." Marcus glanced at Evelyn, who sat beside him taking notes. "These assets aren't abandoned," Marcus said. "They have documented owners, families who are being contacted and verified." Carson smiled thinly. "Families in other countries, with dubious claims. It could take years to verify, decades. Meanwhile, the money sits idle. Wouldn't it be better to put it to use now, helping Coloradans?" "No," Marcus said simply. Carson's smile faded. "You're making a mistake. Assets of this magnitude attract attention, scrutiny, audits. You could face tax bills that bankrupt you, legal fees that consume everything. Work with us and we'll protect you from that." Marcus stood. "I appreciate you coming all this way, but my answer is no. The assets go back to the families Werner protected. That's non-negotiable." Carson stood as well. "Then you should know, Mr. Reed, that I'll be introducing legislation to address situations exactly like this. Treasure trove laws, abandoned asset claims. You may not have a choice much longer." He left, and Marcus felt the walls closing in. Sophie noticed the strain. She was 12, perceptive, old enough to understand that her father was carrying weight he wouldn't share. One night, as Marcus reviewed legal documents at the kitchen table, she sat down across from him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always, baby. Why are you doing this? Giving all that money away?" "You could keep it. No one would blame you. We could have a real house. I could have new clothes that actually fit. Jake could have the art supplies he wants. You could stop working so hard." Marcus set down his papers. "You're right. We could have all that." "Wouldn't you want it?" Sophie asked. "Of course," Marcus said. "But would I want it if it meant stealing from families who already lost everything? Would I want you and Jake growing up knowing your father chose money over doing what's right?" Sophie was quiet. Then she said, "Kids at school say you're stupid, that you're crazy for giving away millions." "What do you say back?" Marcus asked. "I say my dad's the bravest person I know," Sophie said, her voice small, "because it's easy to be good when it doesn't cost you anything. But you're being good even though it costs everything." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. He reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "When your mum got sick," he said quietly, "when the bills kept coming and the insurance denied everything, and I had to choose between treatments that might save her and bankruptcy that would destroy us, I chose her, every time. We lost the house, lost our savings, lost everything except each other." Marcus paused, composing himself. "And even though she died anyway, even though we ended up broken, I've never regretted that choice. Because some things matter more than money. Some things you can't put a price on." "Like integrity?" Sophie asked. "Like teaching my kids that who you are matters more than what you have," Marcus said. Sophie nodded slowly. "Then I think you're making the right choice, even if it's hard." "Especially because it's hard," Marcus corrected gently. By mid-December, Evelyn had assembled a comprehensive plan. They'd verified 6 families definitively, located descendants of 4 more. 2 families remained untraced, either lost to history or documentation too incomplete. The assets would be divided according to Werner's documented wishes and Evelyn's legal framework. 40% would go to verified family descendants. That was approximately $104 million, split among the families based on original deposit amounts. Another 40% would establish the Werner Hyas Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to helping refugees and displaced families. Marcus would manage it initially, with oversight from an independent board. The remaining 20%, roughly $52 million, would go to Marcus. Compensation for discovery, for protecting the assets, for choosing transparency and honor over theft. "It's legally defensible," Evelyn explained. "You're entitled to a finder's fee. The families have agreed to this split. They recognize that without you, none of this would be recovered. And the foundation ensures Werner's mission continues." Marcus stared at the number. 52 million. It was more money than he'd ever imagined. More than enough to change his family's life forever. And it felt both overwhelming and insufficient. "The foundation," he said. "It stays here, in Pine Ridge." Evelyn nodded. "We'll renovate the chalet, turn it into the foundation headquarters, hire local staff, create jobs, turn this place into a center for refugee assistance, legal aid, resettlement support. Werner protected 12 families. You could help thousands." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "That feels right." "Good," Evelyn said, "because we're going public tomorrow. The press conference is set. Are you ready?" "No," Marcus admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The press conference was held in the chalet's living room, now cleaned and repaired enough to be presentable. Local reporters from 3 newspapers and 2 TV stations attended. Along with them came curious townspeople, Sheriff Bradley, Mayor Henderson, and what felt like half of Pine Ridge. Marcus stood behind a makeshift podium, Evelyn beside him, and told the story. He explained the auction, the locked door, Werner's journal, the vault. He outlined the families, the plan for return, the foundation. He showed documentation, photos, the meticulous records Werner had kept. When he finished, the room erupted in questions. How much total? Are you keeping any? What about taxes? Is this legal? Who were these families? Evelyn fielded the technical questions. Marcus answered the personal ones. Why give it away? One reporter asked. Because it's not mine, Marcus said simply. Werner Hyas spent 5 years protecting assets for families fleeing persecution. He died keeping that promise. I'm not going to dishonor that by stealing what he died protecting. But you're entitled to it legally, the reporter pressed. Legally, maybe, Marcus said. But there's a difference between legal and right. I want my kids to know their father chose right. The clip went viral. By evening, it had been picked up by national news. By morning, Marcus Reed, single father and unlikely guardian of a $250 million secret, was trending on social media. The reactions were predictably mixed. Some called him a hero, others called him a fool. Financial advisors went on television to explain how much wealth he was surrendering. Ethicists debated the nature of found money and moral obligation, but the response that mattered most came from the families. Petra Kovac, whose grandmother had fled Prague in 1982, released a statement. Marcus Reed had a choice. He could have kept our family's legacy and no one would have known. Instead, he chose honor. He chose to finish what Werner Haas started. My grandmother's escape meant something because someone cared enough to protect what she left behind. Now someone else cares enough to return it. That's not foolishness, that's humanity. Similar statements came from other families. Offers of gratitude, promises to contribute to the foundation. One family donated their entire recovered amount back to the trust, saying the knowledge that it had been safe was worth more than the money itself. But not all responses were positive. Someone vandalized the chalet, spray-painted idiot across the front door, shot out 2 windows with a BB gun, slashed Marcus's truck tires. The harassment escalated, threatening calls, letters promising violence. One message sent to Evelyn's office was explicit. He's making powerful people look bad, people who kept quiet about certain assets. Tell Reed to back off or accidents happen. Sheriff Bradley increased patrols. Marcus installed professional security, motion sensors, cameras, reinforced locks. He moved Sophie and Jake to stay with Mrs. Kowalski temporarily until the threats died down. He hated being separated from them, but their safety mattered more than his comfort. Then came the break-in. Marcus was alone at the chalet, working late on foundation paperwork, when he heard glass shatter downstairs. He froze, grabbed his phone, dialed 911. Footsteps, heavy, multiple people. A voice. Check the bedrooms. The vault's gotta be somewhere. Marcus moved silently to the master bedroom, locked the door, whispered his location to the 911 dispatcher. Through the door he heard them searching, tearing through rooms, cursing when they couldn't find the vault entrance. Then a voice closer. Try this door. The handle rattled, locked. A shoulder slammed against it. Once, twice. The wood cracked. Marcus backed against the far wall, heart hammering. The door burst open. 2 men, ski masks, crowbars. They saw Marcus and paused. Where is it? One demanded. Where's the vault? Marcus raised his hands. Police are on the way. You need to leave. One man stepped forward. Last chance. Show us the vault or things get ugly. Marcus stood his ground. No. The man raised the crowbar. And then sirens split the night. The men ran. Marcus heard them thundering down the stairs, crashing through the house. Gone. Sheriff Bradley arrived 3 minutes later with 2 deputies. Found Marcus shaking but unhurt. The intruders had fled into the forest. The house was a disaster. Bradley looked at the damage and shook his head. This is getting dangerous, Marcus. I know. You need to seriously consider whether this is worth your life. Marcus met his eyes. If I back down now, I'm telling my kids that doing right only matters when it's safe. That's not the lesson I want to teach. Bradley sighed. You're stubborn as hell. Learned from the best, Marcus said. My wife never backed down from anything, even cancer. Bradley gripped his shoulder. All right. Then we do this the hard way. I'm assigning a deputy to live here until the foundation is established and the families are paid. And you're getting a guard dog, a big one. Marcus laughed despite himself. Deal. Over the next weeks, Pine Ridge divided into camps. Some supported Marcus, called him a man of principle, donated materials for the chalet renovation, volunteered time, showed up to help clean vandalism, make repairs, stand guard. Others resented him, saw his choice as judgment on their own values, spread rumors, encouraged by outside agitators and the few families who thought they deserved the money more than foreign refugees. But slowly, something shifted. A local teacher, Mrs. Martinez, showed up one Saturday with her high school ethics class. We'd like to volunteer, she said. Help with the foundation. My students need to see what integrity looks like in action. A retired carpenter, Old man Hensley, who hadn't spoken to Marcus in years, arrived with a truckload of Finnish lumber. "Heard you're doing something good," he muttered. "Figured I'd help." A woman named Claire, whose own family had fled Vietnam in 1975, brought food and stories. "You're honoring something sacred," she told Marcus. "My family was helped by strangers when we had nothing. Werner Haas did the same. Now you're continuing it. This matters." One by one, allies emerged, not for money or recognition, but because they believed in what Marcus represented. Because in a world that often felt cruel and transactional, here was someone choosing different. Choosing honor. Choosing sacrifice. And it inspired something dormant in people, reminded them of who they wanted to be. By January, the foundation framework was complete. Evelyn had structured everything legally. The first family payouts were scheduled for February. The chalet renovation had begun in earnest, funded by Marcus's finder's fee. The property would become the Werner Haas Center for Refugee Assistance, with offices, meeting rooms, a small museum dedicated to Werner's story, and Marcus's family living in the private residence upstairs. Sophie would finally have her own room. Jake would have his. And Marcus would have a purpose larger than survival. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Marcus sat in Werner's old office, reading through the journal one more time. He'd read it dozens of times now, but certain passages still struck him. One entry from December 1986. "I wonder sometimes if this was worth it, the isolation, the fear, the weight of responsibility. But then I remember the faces of those I've helped. Mothers who can sleep knowing their children's future is protected. Fathers who can focus on escape instead of worrying about wealth. I chose this burden, and I'd choose it again, because some things are worth protecting, even at cost to ourselves." Marcus understood now. Werner hadn't died protecting money. He'd died protecting hope, protecting the belief that humans could still help each other, still keep promises, still choose sacrifice over selfishness. And now Marcus was protecting that same belief, carrying it forward, proving that Werner's faith in humanity hadn't been misplaced. Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Hot chocolate?" She offered a mug. Marcus smiled. "You're the best." She sat in the window seat, looking out at the snow-covered pines. "Dad? Yeah? Are you happy?" Marcus considered the question. He was broke, threatened, exhausted, facing months more of legal battles and security concerns. But he was also purposeful, aligned, teaching his kids through action instead of words. "I am," he said. "Are you?" Sophie nodded. "I like having a dad I'm proud of, even if it means we don't have a lot of money." "We have enough," Marcus said. "And more importantly, we have integrity." Sophie sipped her chocolate. "Think Werner would be proud?" Marcus looked at the journal. "Yeah, baby. I think he would." Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent, peaceful, covering the scars of recent violence with white forgiveness. And in the distance, the lights of Pine Ridge glowed soft against the darkness. A small town slowly learning that the measure of a man wasn't what he kept, but what he chose to give away. By the first week of February, the Werner Haas Center for Refugee Assistance was no longer just a dream sketched on legal documents. It was real. The chalet stood transformed, its timber facade restored to honey gold, new windows gleaming, the Riverstone chimney reaching toward blue Colorado sky like a monument to second chances. The official dedication was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day, a date Evelyn had chosen deliberately. Because this, she'd said, was about love, the kind that transcends borders and decades and death itself. The families started arriving 3 days before the ceremony. Petra Kovac flew in from Prague with her elderly aunt, the last living sibling of the grandmother who'd fled Czechoslovakia in 1982. They stood in the chalet's entry hall, the aunt's wrinkled hands trembling as she touched the wood paneling. "My sister stood here," the old woman whispered in Czech, Petra translating. She told me about this place, about the kind man who promised to keep everything safe. I never believed her. I thought grief had made her imagine kindness where there was none. But she was right. He kept his promise. Marcus, standing nearby with Sophie and Jake, felt his throat constrict. "Your sister was brave," he said through Petra. "She trusted a stranger because she had no other choice. That takes courage." The aunt looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen too much loss. "And you," she said through Petra, "you had a choice. You chose honor. That takes a different kind of courage, perhaps harder." More families arrived. Anton Constantinescu and his 3 siblings, carrying their grandmother's jewelry box, the same one she'd described entrusting to Werner 41 years ago. The Nowak family from Poland and New York, 3 generations gathered to witness something their grandfather had died believing was lost forever. The Richter family from Berlin, led by a professor of history who'd written extensively about asset seizure during communist regimes and never imagined he'd be part of a recovery story himself. Each family brought documents, photos, stories, and each family, upon seeing the safety deposit boxes with their names, upon touching the assets their ancestors had protected, wept. Marcus watched it all with Sophie on one side and Jake on the other, and understood that what he'd found beneath the chalet wasn't treasure in any conventional sense. It was proof. Proof that promises could outlive the people who made them. That sacrifice could ripple forward through time. That one person's choice to help could change the trajectory of entire families decades later. The night before the dedication, Evelyn hosted a private dinner at the chalet for all the families. 23 people gathered around the long table Marcus had built from salvaged timber, the same wood that had once been boarded over broken windows. Now it served a different purpose, bringing people together instead of keeping them out. Evelyn stood, glass raised. "To Werner Haas," she said, "a man none of us met, but all of us owe. He saw people at their most vulnerable and chose protection over profit. He kept faith when faith was dangerous, and he built something that outlasted him." The glasses raised. "To Werner." Then Petra stood. "And to Marcus Reed," she said, "who could have taken everything and instead chose to give it back, who honored a dead man's promise when the world would have forgiven him for breaking it, who taught his children and taught all of us that integrity isn't about what you do when people are watching, it's about what you do when no one would ever know." Marcus shook his head, embarrassed. "I just did what was right." "That's the point," Anton said quietly. "Most people don't. You did. That makes all the difference." Jake, who'd been quiet through dinner, suddenly spoke up. "My dad says Werner was like a superhero, but not the kind with powers. The kind who just decides to be good even when it's hard." The table fell silent. Then the old Czech aunt smiled, her face creasing into 1,000 wrinkles. "From the mouths of children," she said in heavily accented English. "Yes, that is exactly what heroes are." After dinner, as people filtered through the chalet examining the small museum Evelyn's team had created, documenting Werner's story and the families he'd helped, Marcus found himself alone in the vault. It was empty now. All the safety deposit boxes opened, contents catalogued, verified, prepared for distribution. Tomorrow, at the ceremony, each family would receive documentation of their assets and instructions for transfer. Some had chosen immediate payment. Others wanted investments managed through the foundation. All had agreed to transparency, to having their stories told, so Werner's mission wouldn't be forgotten. Marcus ran his hand along the metal shelving units. 41 years these had held secrets, and now the secrets were free, transformed from hidden wealth into active good. He thought about Werner's final journal entry, the fear in those words, the resignation. Werner had died believing he'd failed, believing the assets would stay buried forever, the families never knowing their sacrifices had been preserved. But he'd been wrong, because Marcus had found them, had chosen right, had finished what Werner started. Sophie appeared in the vault entrance. "Dad? The Richters want to take a photo with you and Jake." Marcus smiled. "Tell them I'll be right up." Sophie didn't leave. Instead, she walked down the stone steps and stood beside her father in the empty vault. "This is where it all was?" she asked. Marcus nodded. $260 million in assets, 41 years of dust and darkness, and one man's hope that someone would eventually do the right thing. "Do you think he knew," Sophie asked, "that someone like you would find it?" Marcus considered. "I think he had to believe it was possible. Otherwise, why leave the journal? Why hide the code? He had faith that somewhere, somehow, someone would care enough to look." "And you did," Sophie said. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "I did." The dedication ceremony began at 10 a.m. under clear February skies. The cold was sharp, but the sun was brilliant, turning the snow-covered pines into a cathedral of light. Over 200 people attended, the families, of course, but also townspeople from Pine Ridge, some who'd supported Marcus from the beginning, others who'd doubted him, mocked him, even threatened him. They came anyway, drawn by curiosity or shame or the simple human need to witness something larger than themselves. Mayor Henderson gave a brief speech about Pine Ridge's history and future. Sheriff Bradley talked about integrity and sacrifice. Evelyn outlined the Foundation's mission and structure. But the moment that mattered came when Petra Kovac stepped to the podium with her elderly aunt at her side. "My grandmother died in 1998, Petra said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. She was 83, poor, living in a small flat in Prague. She'd survived the communists, survived loss, survived watching her country torn apart and rebuilt. But she never stopped talking about the banker, the kind Swiss man who'd taken her jewelry, her savings, everything she had left, and promised to keep it safe." Petra paused, composing herself. "We thought she'd been swindled, thought she'd trusted the wrong person and lost everything. For years, my mother and I believed our grandmother's story was just that, a story, a way to cope with loss by imagining someone had cared." Petra looked at her aunt, who nodded encouragement. 2 months ago, we received a call from Evelyn Park. She told us assets belonging to our family had been discovered. At first, we thought it was a scam. We almost hung up. But she sent documents, photos, proof, and we realized my grandmother had been telling the truth for 40 years. Someone had cared. Werner Haas had kept his promise. "And then," Petra continued, her voice strengthening, "we learned about Marcus Reed, a single father who bought an old house and found a fortune. Who could have kept it legally? Who could have changed his family's life overnight? Who instead chose to honor a promise made before he was born? Chose to return wealth to strangers? Chose integrity over wealth?" The crowd was absolutely still. "My grandmother would have loved Marcus Reed," Petra said. "She believed the world was made of 2 kinds of people, those who help and those who hurt. She taught me that we each choose, every day, which kind we'll be." Petra turned to look at Marcus, who stood with Sophie and Jake near the rebuilt front entrance. Marcus Reed chose to help, chose to finish what Werner Haas started, and in doing so, he didn't just return money. He returned faith, faith that promises matter, that honor exists, that some people still choose right even when wrong would be easier. She stepped away from the podium and walked to Marcus, extended her hand. "On behalf of my family and all the families here, thank you. You didn't just give us back our inheritance. You gave us back our belief in humanity." Marcus shook her hand, tears streaming down his face, unashamed. "Your grandmother was brave," he managed. "You all were. I just finished what braver people started." Evelyn stepped forward then, holding a leather folder. "It's time," she said. One by one, the families approached. Evelyn presented each with documentation of their recovered assets, along with the foundation's matching contribution in their family's name. The Kovacs received $3.7 million plus a $3.7 million endowment to the Foundation for Refugee Assistance. The Constantinescu family $2.9 million matched by the Foundation. The Nowaks, the Richters, the others. Each received their inheritance. Each contributed to Werner's ongoing mission. And with each presentation, the crowd applauded. Not politely, genuinely, because they were witnessing something rare. A choosing of community over individual gain, of legacy over immediate gratification. When the last family had been acknowledged, Evelyn turned to Marcus. "And now," she said, "we need to acknowledge the man who made this possible, who protected these assets when he could have stolen them, who chose transparency when secrecy would have been easier, who honored the dead by serving the living." She handed him a folder. Marcus Reed, as finder and protector of the Werner Haas collection, and in accordance with established legal precedent and agreement from all recovered families, you are entitled to 20% of total assets. $52,400,000. Marcus stared at the documentation. He'd known this was coming, had agreed to it. But seeing the number, feeling the weight of what it meant, hit him differently than he'd expected. This money represented security. Sophie's college education guaranteed. Jake's future funded. Medical care if anyone got sick. A real home. Stability. Everything he'd sacrificed 4 years ago when Anne died and the medical bills consumed them. But it also represented something else. A test passed, because he'd chosen to earn this money through honor rather than steal it through silence. And that made it feel different. Cleaner, truly his. Sophie grabbed his hand. "Dad, you okay?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, thought about the girl who'd worn her dead mother's oversized sweaters because they couldn't afford new clothes, who'd shared a bedroom with her brother in a cramped rental, who'd never complained, never demanded, just quietly accepted that their life was hard and helped make it softer however she could. And he thought about Jake, drawing pictures of castles while sitting at a kitchen table covered in past due notices, inventing games that didn't require toys they couldn't afford, believing his father could fix anything because Marcus had never let him see the moments of despair. "I'm okay," Marcus said. Better than okay. He looked at the crowd, at the families whose lives had been changed, at the townspeople who'd watched him choose hard right over easy wrong, at Evelyn, who'd guided him through impossible complexity, at Sheriff Bradley, who'd protected him when protection was needed, at the teachers, carpenters, volunteers who'd helped build something meaningful from something abandoned. "When I bought this place," Marcus said, his voice carrying in the cold air, "I had $8,700 to my name. I was desperate, broke, trying to give my kids something more than survival. I thought I was buying a fixer-upper, a project, maybe a long shot at stability." He paused. "Instead, I bought a responsibility, a test. And honestly, there were moments I wanted to fail it, moments the money felt more important than the morality, moments I thought about taking it all and running, letting someone else worry about dead bankers and refugee families and doing the right thing. But then I'd remember why I bought this place. Not for treasure, for my kids. And what kind of father would I be if I taught Sophie and Jake that stealing is okay when no one's looking? That promises don't matter after the person who made them dies. That money matters more than integrity." Marcus looked at his children. "I'd be the kind of father who raises kids who think the world is about taking what you can get. And my wife," he said, his voice catching, "Anne, she didn't raise our kids that way. She taught me that how you treat people when you have power over them defines who you are. And right now, I had power. I had the power to steal or return, to hide or reveal, to choose myself or choose right." He held up the folder Evelyn had given him. "This money, it's legal. It's mine. Earned through protection and choice and doing what Werner Haas needed someone to do. and I'm going to use it to take care of my family, to give Sophie and Jake the stability they deserve, the education, the security, the future their mother wanted for them. But, he continued, I'm also using it to make sure Werner's mission doesn't end. The foundation will continue, will grow, will help families who are going through what these families went through 40 years ago. Because refugees still exist, persecution still exists, and people still need someone to believe in them when they've lost everything. The crowd erupted, not in polite applause but in genuine celebration. People stood, cheered, some crying openly. And Marcus, standing in front of the chalet he'd bought for $8,500, felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a struggling handyman anymore, wasn't just a widower barely surviving. He was a builder, a protector, a man who'd been tested and hadn't broken. And his children, watching him with pride so obvious it hurt, knew exactly who their father was. Not because he'd told them, but because he'd shown them. By choosing hard right over easy wrong. By finishing what a dead stranger had started. By proving that integrity wasn't negotiable, regardless of price. The celebration continued for hours. Families sharing meals, stories, hope. Townspeople who doubted Marcus now approaching to apologize, to offer support, to admit they'd been wrong. The mayor announced that Pine Ridge would be designating a Werner Hyas Day each February 14th, not just to celebrate the banker who'd helped 12 families, but to celebrate the choice to help. The decision to be the kind of person who keeps promises, even when keeping them costs everything. As the sun began to set, painting the snow pink and gold, Marcus found himself standing at the edge of the property with Sheriff Bradley. Hell of a journey, Bradley said. From widower to philanthropist in 4 months. Marcus chuckled. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm just a guy who found something that wasn't mine and gave it back. That's exactly what a philanthropist is, Bradley countered. Someone who gives instead of takes. You could have kept it all legally and slept fine, but you didn't, because you're wired different. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Anne always told me that character is built in moments when no one's watching, when you can choose easy or right, and the only witness is yourself. I think about that a lot, what she'd think of my choices. Bradley clapped his shoulder. She'd be proud. Hell, we're all proud. Over the following weeks, the foundation began its real work. Evelyn had assembled a board of directors that included 2 of the refugee family descendants, a retired immigration lawyer, a social worker, and Marcus himself. They hired staff, established partnerships with resettlement agencies, created programs for legal assistance, housing support, job training, and cultural integration. The chalet became a hub of activity. Refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Central America found their way to Pine Ridge, guided by word-of-mouth networks and non-profit referrals. They arrived scared, exhausted, carrying children and trauma and hope, so fragile it could shatter with one wrong word. And the foundation caught them, provided temporary housing in renovated buildings around Pine Ridge, connected them with language classes, job opportunities, medical care, helped them navigate the impossible bureaucracy of asylum and immigration, helped them breathe. Marcus didn't run the daily operations. He'd hired professionals for that. But he was present, teaching woodworking classes to refugees who needed job skills, helping repair donated cars so families could get to work, sitting with traumatized fathers who'd lost everything and needed someone who understood that particular grief. One afternoon in late March, a Syrian man named Rashid approached Marcus in the workshop. Rashid had fled Aleppo with his wife and 3 children, had lost his brother and parents in the war, had spent 2 years in refugee camps before finally reaching Colorado. Through a translator, Rashid told Marcus his story. Then he asked a question. Why? Why do you help people you don't know? People who can give you nothing? Marcus set down his tools. Because someone helped me once, he said. When my wife was dying, when I couldn't afford treatments, a charity paid for 6 months of her care. They didn't know us, didn't owe us anything, but they helped anyway. It didn't save her, but it gave us time. Precious time I'll never forget. Rashid nodded slowly. And now you pay forward. Exactly, Marcus said. Werner Hyas helped families he didn't know. I'm just continuing what he started. We all are. The translator relayed this. Rashid's eyes filled with tears. He spoke rapidly in Arabic. The translator smiled. He says you are a good man. He says his children will grow up hearing your story. Hearing that when they had nothing, strangers in a small town chose to care. He says this is what God looks like, people helping people. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. Tell him, he said. Tell him that his courage in bringing his family to safety is what God looks like. I'm just the guy with a hammer and some space. He's the hero. By summer, Pine Ridge had changed. The foundation employed 17 people, most of them locals. The economic impact rippled through the small town. New businesses opened to serve the growing population. A Middle Eastern grocery, a language school, a community center offering cultural exchange programs. Some longtime residents grumbled about the changes, whispered about the town losing its identity, but others embraced it, saw their children becoming friends with refugee kids, learned to cook new foods, discovered that difference didn't mean threat, it meant richness. The high school started a mentorship program pairing local students with newly arrived refugee teens. Sophie became a mentor to a 15-year-old girl from Afghanistan named Layla. They met twice a week, Sophie helping with English and math, Layla teaching Sophie Dari phrases and how to make bolani. One evening, Sophie came home glowing. "Dad," she said, "Layla told me today that I'm the first friend she's made in America. The first person besides her family who's been kind to her. She said, before me, she thought Americans hated refugees." Marcus hugged his daughter. "You showed her different. That's powerful, baby. That's how the world changes. One friendship at a time." Jake, now 10, had taken to following Marcus around the foundation building. He'd help sort donations, draw pictures for newly arrived families, play with refugee children who didn't speak English but understood the universal language of childhood games. One day, he asked Marcus a question that stopped him cold. "Dad, when I grow up, can I run the foundation?" Marcus knelt to his son's level. "You want to do that?" Jake nodded seriously. "Werner helped people even though it was dangerous. You helped people even though you could have been rich. I want to help people too. That's what our family does, right?" Marcus felt tears slip down his face. "Yeah, buddy, that's exactly what our family does. And yes, someday, if you still want to, you can run the foundation." Jake grinned. "Cool. Can I paint my office purple?" Marcus laughed. "Whatever color you want." By autumn, the 1-year anniversary of Marcus buying the chalet approached. Evelyn organized a quiet celebration, just the core team, a few family descendants who'd stayed involved, and some key community members. They gathered in the chalet's main room, now a comfortable space with photographs lining the walls. Werner Haas in his younger days, the families he'd helped, Marcus and his kids on the day of the dedication, refugees who'd been resettled through the foundation. A visual timeline of sacrifice continuing forward through generations. Petra Kovac had flown in from Prague for the anniversary. She stood with Marcus, both of them looking at a photo of Werner taken sometime in the early 1980s. Serious expression, kind eyes, holding a ledger. "He looks lonely," Petra observed. Marcus nodded. "I think he was. He gave up everything normal, family, social life, comfort, all to protect people he barely knew." Petra turned to Marcus. "Not unlike what you did. You could have taken the money and left. Bought a mansion somewhere warm. Instead, you stayed. Built this, dedicated your life to continuing his work. Sacrificed your chance at easy wealth for hard purpose." Marcus shrugged. Didn't feel like sacrifice. Felt like the only choice that made sense. "That's the point," Petra said gently. "For people like you and Werner, Integrity isn't a choice, it's a compulsion. You can't be any other way. The world is lucky people like you exist. As winter approached again, completing the cycle, Marcus found himself standing in the same spot where he'd stood 13 months earlier. The master bedroom, now his bedroom, looking out over pine-covered mountains. But everything else had changed. The chalet was warm, full of life and purpose. His children slept in their own rooms, secure and happy. Downstairs, the foundation's work continued 7 days a week. And across the world, families who'd thought their grandparents' sacrifices meant nothing had discovered that promises could outlive the people who made them. Marcus pulled out Werner's journal, kept now in a climate-controlled case, but occasionally borrowed for private reflection. He read the final entry again. Werner's fear, his hope, his faith that someone would understand what he'd tried to do. "I understand," Marcus whispered to the dead man who'd changed his life. "I understand, and I finished it. Thank you for believing someone would." The next morning, Marcus woke to Sophie shaking his shoulder. "Dad," she said, "there's someone here to see you. It's important." Marcus dressed quickly and went downstairs. In the foundation's reception area stood an elderly man, perhaps 75, with weathered features and careful eyes. Beside him, a younger woman, maybe 40, held his arm supportively. The old man looked up when Marcus entered. "Mr. Reed?" "Yes," Marcus said. "How can I help you?" The man's voice shook. "My name is David Kessler. My father was Otto Kessler, a banker in Zurich. He—" The man paused. He was the one who threatened Werner Haas. Marcus froze. The name from the journal. Kessler, the man Werner had been running from. "I know what my father did," David continued. "I've known for years. He was involved in laundering money for criminal organizations. When Werner refused to give him access codes to certain accounts. When Werner disappeared, my father sent people after him." "I think," David's voice broke, "I think my father had Werner killed." The room fell silent. David wiped his eyes. "I've lived with that shame my entire adult life. After my father died 10 years ago, I found documents, letters, proof of what he'd done. I've been trying to find Werner's family to apologize, to make amends, but he had no family. And then 6 months ago, I saw the news about you, about the foundation, about what you'd discovered." The younger woman spoke. "I'm David's daughter Rachel. We've been following the foundation's work. We wanted to help, to do something to balance what David's father did." David reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "It's not enough. Nothing could be enough. But I'm donating $5 million to the Werner Haas Foundation, in his name, as an apology, as an attempt to turn evil into good." Marcus stared at the envelope. "You don't have to do this. Your father's sins aren't yours." "I know," David said, "but his legacy is mine, and I choose what that legacy becomes. By helping continue Werner's work, maybe I redeem a small part of what my father destroyed." Marcus took the envelope. Then he did something David clearly didn't expect. He hugged him. "You're not responsible for your father's choices," Marcus said, "but you're responsible for yours. And this choice, this is beautiful. Thank you." David wept openly. Rachel wrapped her arms around both men, and in that moment, another circle closed. Another piece of healing happened. Another proof that redemption was possible, even for the sins of fathers visited upon sons. The story of Marcus Reed and the Werner Haas Foundation spread far beyond Pine Ridge. Documentaries were made, books written, TED Talks given, but Marcus avoided most of the attention. He wasn't interested in fame, he was interested in work, in helping the next family, in teaching his children through action, in proving every day that integrity wasn't just a word, it was a choice, made in thousands of small moments, in deciding to open a locked door instead of walking away, in choosing transparency over secrecy, in honoring a dead man's promise when the whole world would have forgiven him for breaking it. Years later, when asked by a journalist what he'd learned from the experience, Marcus answered simply, "I learned that we're all temporary guardians of whatever we have. Money, property, talent, time. None of it really belongs to us. We just get to decide what we do with it while it's in our care. Werner understood that. He was a guardian of wealth that belonged to people who needed protection. And when I found it, I became a guardian too, not an owner. A guardian, the journalist pressed. But you kept some of it. Doesn't that contradict your point? Marcus shook his head. I kept what was legally and ethically mine. Compensation for choosing right when wrong was easier. But the majority went where it belonged. To families. To continuing Werner's mission. And honestly, the money I kept is the least important part of what I found. What did you find that was more important? The journalist asked. Marcus smiled. I found proof that humans can still be good, that promises still matter, that sacrifice ripples forward through time, that one person choosing integrity can change the trajectory of hundreds of lives. That's worth more than any amount of money. Anyone can find wealth if they're lucky. But it takes something special, something rare, to find wealth and choose to give it away. To honor promises made by strangers. To sacrifice easy comfort for hard integrity. To teach children that who you are matters more than what you have. Marcus Reed wasn't special because he found $260 million. He was special because he found it and chose to be the kind of person Werner Haas had faith existed. The kind who helps instead of hurts, who builds instead of takes, who finishes what others started because finishing it matters more than profiting from it. As the sun set over Pine Ridge on another February 14th, now 3 years after the original dedication, Marcus stood with Sophie and Jake at Werner's memorial. They'd erected a simple stone marker on the chalet grounds with Werner's name, dates, and one line. He protected what others had lost, one promise at a time. Sophie was 15 now, talking about studying international law. Jake was 12, already volunteering 20 hours a week at the foundation, and Marcus was 41, no longer the desperate widower barely surviving, now a builder, a guardian, a man who'd been tested and passed, a father raising children who understood that character was built in moments when no one was watching, who'd learned through lived example that doing right mattered more than being rich, who knew their father had chosen them over comfort by choosing integrity over wealth. "Dad," Sophie said, "do you ever regret it? Giving away all that money?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the young woman she was becoming, strong, ethical, kind. Looked at Jake, drawing in his sketchbook, creating art to hang in the foundation's hallways to welcome traumatized families. Looked at the chalet, warm and full of purpose, at the town around them, changed and richer for the choices he'd made. "I don't regret a single thing," Marcus said. "Every choice led here, and here is exactly where we're supposed to be." The wind stirred the pines. Somewhere inside the foundation, a Syrian mother was learning English. An Afghan teenager was applying to college. A Venezuelan family was moving into their first apartment. And it was all happening because 40 years ago, a lonely banker chose to help. Because 13 months ago, a desperate father chose to honor that help instead of exploit it. Because humans could still be good, still keep promises, still choose right. Because sometimes the poorest choice you can make is keeping everything when you could change the world by giving it away. And sometimes the richest man in the room is the one who understands that legacy isn't measured in what you keep. It's measured in what you give, what you protect, what you build that outlasts you. Marcus Reed had built something eternal, not with money, with choice. The kind of choice that whispers to future generations that integrity still matters, that promises still count, that one person choosing good can ripple forward forever. As stars emerged in the darkening sky, Marcus took his children's hands, headed back toward the chalet. Toward warmth and purpose and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd done right when right was hard. Because that's what heroes do. Not the kind with capes or powers, but the kind who simply decide, in the quiet moments when no one's watching and no one would ever know, to be good anyway, to keep promises, to honor the dead by serving the living, to choose integrity over wealth, to finish what others started, to build legacies that matter more than money. And that, more than any treasure hidden beneath locked doors, was the real fortune Marcus Reed had found. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep discovering. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe integrity is worth more than gold.